The stars were silent. Not peaceful. Not calm. Just silent. The kind of silence that wrapped around the spine and whispered of things that should remain untouched. Captain Yorin had traveled half the known galaxy, seen black hole eclipses and nebulous storms that swallowed moons. But nothing unsettled him more than the dark stretch ahead. They called it the Silent Quadrant. Not a name born of science or coordinates. A name born of fear. Not one ship had returned from that expanse in nearly 2 centuries. No signals. No debris. Just disappearance. Yorin stood at the viewport, eyes fixed on the invisible line where star charts ended and mystery began. Behind him, his crew tried to keep the air light. A joke here. A chuckle there. But the tension bled through. "You believe the stories?" his first officer asked. Her voice was low, cautious. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he pressed his palm against the reinforced glass. "I don't believe in myths," he said. "But patterns? Patterns don't lie." And the pattern was brutal. Every exploratory probe, every pirate, every scavenger, vanished. No warning. No final message. Just gone. Even the most powerful empires skirted the edge and looked away. Because deep inside every alien who studied the stars was the same unspoken fear. Human space was cursed. Not because of ghosts, but because of what humans had done, and what they might still be capable of. 180 standard years ago, humanity fought its last war. They emerged from their cradle world with speed and violence no other species had ever matched. They didn't negotiate. They didn't posture. They obliterated fleets and systems with precision. And then, they stopped. No peace treaties. No expansion. They just pulled back, marked their borders, and went silent. Other civilizations speculated, of course. Some said internal collapse. Others believed they ascended to another plane. A few whispered of extinction. But none dared test the boundary. Yorin's ship, the Dravari Wind, wasn't a military cruiser. It was a cargo freighter hauling volatile ore from the rim colonies. But a navigation error had brought them close. Too close. They weren't inside yet. But even from here, the stars looked different. Dimmer. As if light itself feared to pass through. The communications officer turned from her console, her voice shaking slightly. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission fragment. Auto-archive, time-stamped 71 years ago." "From where?" She hesitated. "Origin, inside the Silent Quadrant." The room stilled. Even the humming lights seemed to falter. "Play it," Yorin ordered. Static. Then a voice. Male. Desperate. "This is Scout Vessel K-74, coordinates marked, do not, repeat, do not follow. We thought was abandoned, no stars, just metal, gods, the eyes, they don't blink, they're watching." The message ended with a burst of static that felt like it had clawed through time itself. The officer turned pale. "That's all of it." For several seconds, no one spoke. Then the engineer muttered, "Could be a hoax." 71 years old? Someone shot back. Yorin exhaled slowly. "Plot reverse course. Take us back along the drift line. No sudden burns. I don't care if it takes 6 days. We're not touching that boundary." But even as he said it, he wondered, what if it was already too late? A low ping echoed from the long-range scanner. Just a flicker. Not a ship. Not a mass. Not anything the systems could identify. A presence. The AI didn't register a threat. No proximity alert. No trajectory. No data at all. Just a sensation in the instruments. A ghost in the circuits. The helmsman looked up. "Sir, do you feel that?" He did. A pressure in the air, though the environmental systems were stable. Something behind the silence. Watching. Judging. Old memories stirred. From academy days. The old footage. The declassified scraps. Earth's orbital shipyards. The angular shapes of human warforms. Blacker than vacuum. built not to survive battle, but to erase it. And then the voice of his academy instructor echoed in his mind. The warning every NAV officer was taught. Asterisk. If your ship ever drifts toward human space, turn back. Not because you'll be stopped, but because you won't be warned. Asterisk. Yorin turned from the viewport, snapping orders. Activate stealth mesh. Shut down external beacons. Begin cold drift. The crew didn't argue. But just before the systems powered down, the sensor pinged again. This time, the signal was clear. A pulse. Artificial. Intentional. Encoded in ancient Terran dialect. Only 3 words. We see you. Then the signal vanished. Not jammed. Not intercepted. Withdrawn. The crew froze. Yorin stared at the message, his throat dry. They weren't even inside the border. Not 1 meter. But someone, or something, was already watching. And that meant the stories weren't myths. They were warnings. Across the galaxy, in distant halls and planetary governments, the silence was treated like folklore. A cautionary tale for explorers and smugglers. But out here, on the edge of the void, with nothing but the hum of failing instruments and the crushing stare of the stars, Yorin understood the truth. No one dared cross into human space. And now, he finally understood why. It wasn't fear. It was instinct. And it had just whispered, "You are not alone." The Varnak Imperium hadn't fought a true war in nearly 3 decades. Not since the subjugation of the Valari moons. Their fleet stretched across 11 sectors, unchallenged, unmatched, unquestioned. To them, power was not proven, it was assumed. And in that assumption, the idea of Earth was not terrifying. It was amusing. In the Imperial Hall of Strategy, under banners of conquest stitched with the bones of extinct species, a single red sector blinked on the holomap. It represented human space. Marked in every database as a no-fly zone, unexplored, unmapped, untouched. Strategist Veruin stood before it, claws twitching with irritation. We leave this territory unclaimed, unchallenged, and profitable. For what? Ancient myths and outdated warnings? No one answered. Veruin leaned in, his voice sharper. The galaxy bows before our might. And yet here, this empty quadrant, we act like cowards. One junior officer cleared his throat. Sir, multiple expeditions over the centuries have disappeared. Veruin sneered. Then they were weak. And weak vessels deserve to vanish. Silence followed. Not of agreement, but of fear. The Imperium did not tolerate debate. Orders flowed downward, unquestioned. Veruin turned to the map. I want it cleared. A full fleet. 27 ships. Class 2 destroyers. Forward scouts. And we enter from the center. Let the galaxy watch. No hesitation. No discussion. Within hours, Fleet Group Emberfall launched. Their destination, the heart of the Silent Quadrant. The soldiers aboard carried themselves with the confidence of empire. Most had never faced real resistance. The few who had wore their scars as trophies, not lessons. As the ships accelerated toward human space, jokes echoed in the halls. Hope the humans left us something shiny. Maybe they forgot how to fly. Just another ghost story to scare hatchlings. But beneath the laughter, some felt it. The weight. The quiet wrongness. The creeping cold beyond the hull. First Officer Grawl kept staring at the mission brief, lips tight. No recon. No diplomacy. Just entry. No backup either. Captain Jurex nodded. Imperial Command wants spectacle. Or bait, Grawl muttered. Jurex didn't respond. By the 3rd cycle, the fleet reached the outer limit. Stars became sparse. Background radiation dipped unnaturally low. Sensors began glitching. The science officer dismissed it as interference. Residual quantum haze. Could be old mining fields. No one mentioned that no mining operation had ever existed here. They crossed the border. Nothing happened. No alarms. No resistance. Just empty space. Veruin's voice crackled through the command net. See? A paper myth. We move forward. And they did. The lead scout released the recon drone. Standard protocol. It vanished within 7 seconds. Not destroyed. Not jammed. Just ceased. The data feed ended mid-transmission. No impact. No energy burst. Just a clean break in the stream. Command logged it as a malfunction. The fleet pressed on. Further in, the stars shifted. They weren't out of place, but they seemed arranged. Too symmetrical. The formation wasn't natural. Still, no one stopped. Veruin ordered the ships to spread into a combat diamond. It was the Imperium's favored formation, efficient, arrogant, exposed. Then came the anomaly. An object appeared on long-range scans. Unmoving. No heat signature. No comms. Roughly the size of a light frigate. The fleet slowed. Targeting systems failed to lock. Scanners cycled endlessly without resolving shape or material. Veruin's voice cut across the fleet. Do not hesitate. Mark it and proceed. Captain Jurex hesitated. It's not responding. Could be automated. Veruin snapped. So disable it. We are not here to ask permission. The fleet armed plasma batteries. A single light blinked on the object. Then it disappeared. No explosion. No movement. Just gone. Where it had been, the sensors now registered absolute zero. A dead zone in space. Even stars behind it seemed dimmer. The officers stared at the screen, unable to explain what physics refused to support. Then came the signal. A narrow band pulse, encoded in a language last heard nearly 2 centuries ago. Translated instantly by the AI systems on board. Only 3 words appeared. Turn. Back. Now. Asterisk asterisk. Silence followed. Jurex's command staff shifted uncomfortably. Sir, what if it's real? Veruin overrode the channel. It's desperation. An ancient AI defense grid bluffing for survival. We press forward. The order stood. Engines flared. Formations realigned. And the fleet ventured deeper. Communications began to flicker. Short-range relays reported misfires. Subsystems rebooted without cause. Interior gravity surged for a moment, just long enough for several soldiers to be injured. No cause. No breach. Just a warning. Still, no ship dared speak against command. They advanced another 1,000 kilometers. The forward sensor vessel, Ravlorn, initiated a secondary scan. Within 30 seconds, it disappeared from the net. All systems logged it as inaccessible. Visual feed showed nothing. The ship simply ceased to be. No explosion. No distress. Just deletion. Panic began to stir. Messages flew through encrypted channels. Officers whispering. Asking. Doubting. Veruin's orders became more rigid. Form tighter formations. No retreat. No fear. But fear had arrived. Quietly. Systematically. Without a single weapon fired. Not from the humans. From the silence. The ships now floated inside the border of something vast. Not just territory. Not empire. A design. Unseen lines of control, logic, and warning. Fleet Emberfall had crossed into a graveyard dressed like space. And somewhere out there, behind stars that blinked too slow, something was watching. Not to respond. Not to warn. But to decide. Because the humans weren't gone. They had simply stopped talking. And now, someone else had spoken first. The past asterisk asterisk, I'll keep the fire going. Before the Varnak ever set foot near human space, others had tried. Smaller fleets. Rogue scavengers. Curious explorers. All gone. Their names survived only as footnotes in scattered archives or spoken as grim warnings over drinks in backwater stations. None had been recovered. No vessels. No wreckage. Just absence. The Galactic Archive on Tval Prime housed records of extinct civilizations. Among them, the entry on humanity was short, vague, and redacted. A single paragraph summarized what remained of a species that once made the stars bleed. Asterisk. Humanity emerged rapidly from its origin world, expanding with unmatched aggression. It engaged and defeated 9 major factions within 3 decades. Final engagement, the Trainee Purge. Casualties, 4.2 billion. Status after withdrawal, sealed border, no diplomatic contact, no confirmed sightings. Classification, silence protocol enforced. Asterisk. That was it. No photos. No coordinates. Just a name and the weight of unspoken history. A historian from the Zalari Accord once described them as a paradox, wildly emotional, yet brutally efficient. Their art expressed longing. Their weapons expressed extinction. Long ago, in the final war, humanity hadn't fought to win. They fought to end conflict permanently. And they did. Not with peace treaties or alliances, but by making war too costly to attempt again. The Trainee Empire had learned that last. They were powerful, numerous, and confident. At their peak, they controlled 200 systems. When they struck at Earth, they did so with overwhelming force, 30 dreadnoughts, planetary siege weapons, and a doctrine of total dominance. They never reached Earth. The humans counterattacked with something different. They didn't match ship for ship. They sent 3. The first ship jammed every known frequency and transmitted one phrase, asterisk. Surrender is accepted. Resistance is not. Asterisk. The second ship disabled every sensor and blinded the fleet in absolute blackness. The third ship didn't send a message. It simply deployed. Within 11 minutes, the Trainee fleet ceased to exist. No battle. No survivors. Only vaporized vectors and decaying orbits. Later, planetary sensors on nearby moons picked up strange patterns in local gravity. Short-lived microanomalies. Artificially generated. The only conclusion, humanity had created localized black hole warheads. Weapons that didn't destroy targets. They erased them from existence. After the purge, humanity sent no diplomats. No demands. They pulled back to their space, drew a perfect border, and then nothing. No travel. No trade. No signal traffic. It wasn't surrender. It was silence. For generations, scholars tried to decode the message behind the withdrawal. Some thought the humans feared their own power. Others believed they had achieved some higher evolution. But the few who studied the old battles knew better. Humanity hadn't left the galaxy. They had lost interest in it. They had built what they needed, destroyed what they deemed threats, and walked away. Not to retreat, but to wait. No species had ever done that. No one had ever won and then vanished. It left the rest of the galaxy to wrestle with uncertainty. And yet time dulls all fear. New generations forgot the screams encoded in ancient transmissions. New leaders viewed the human border not as a warning, but as territory unclaimed. The Varnak Imperium had risen in the human absence. They had never faced them. They didn't believe the data. They saw silence as weakness. But there were still those who remembered. Like the Draku elder who spoke at the Interstellar Symposium 3 decades ago. He had fought in the final war. One of the few who survived a skirmish with humanity and lived to tell it. When asked what he saw, he said only asterisk. They didn't fight like soldiers. They fought like inevitability. Asterisk. His words were dismissed. Now, as the Varnak fleet moved deeper into the Forbidden Zone, their arrogance began to erode. The stars around them didn't twinkle. They stared. Navigational data grew inconsistent. Shipboard AI began to loop irrational patterns. The further they went, the less the galaxy made sense. Someone, somewhere, had rewritten the laws of predictability. The humans hadn't just built weapons. They had built systems. Autonomous defense grids. Surveillance arrays embedded in planetary crusts. AI constructs evolved beyond intelligence. Designed only for defense, never diplomacy. They didn't broadcast warnings. They didn't issue ultimatums. They watched. And when lines were crossed, they acted. The Varnak scans picked up anomalies, brief gravitational distortions, impossible energy spikes, whispers in communication channels that didn't exist. One message flickered through multiple systems simultaneously. It contained no source signature. Just coordinates. The same coordinates where the last known contact with the scout vessel K-74 occurred 71 years ago. The coordinates matched their current position. The science officer froze. "We're in the exact path of the last known vessel to vanish." No one responded. The captain barked orders to recalibrate all sensor arrays. Nothing helped. The darkness was growing. Not visually, but technically. Data began erasing itself. Logs from the past hour, gone. Weapon calibration settings, reset. It wasn't just observation. Something was actively rewriting their presence. The Imperium ships, designed for planetary invasions and fleet engagements, weren't prepared for this kind of warfare. Because it wasn't war. It was prevention. And that's what humanity had always done better than anyone. They didn't just end wars. They made sure the next one never started. Not by negotiation, but by being the consequence others feared more than defeat. Now, the Varnak fleet, built on bravado, floated within that consequence. No resistance yet. No attack. Just the sense of something immense preparing to answer a question they should never have asked. And somewhere, deep within the systems no longer under their control, a human signal echoed for the first time in generations. It was not a call. It was a decision. The first ship disappeared without a sound. One moment it was in formation, broadcasting routine telemetry, engine core running normal. Then it vanished. No explosion. No drift. Just gone. The fleet's sensors didn't register a detonation or malfunction. Its transponder signal cut mid-ping. 1 second, signal alive. Next void. The crew of the adjacent vessel called out, unsure if what they saw was real. Then the system logs confirmed it. Ship 09 had ceased transmitting. Location data returned null. Scanners looped with error code. Object not found. Command flagged it as a potential cloaking field interference. Drones were dispatched to scan the area. None returned. All data relays cut the moment they crossed the same vector. Then came the message. No build-up. No origin trace. Just a sudden, sharp pulse across the entire command network, fleet-wide, simultaneous. Tight beam. Coded in simple galactic standard. 3 words. You were warned. The bridge of every Varnak ship froze. No other transmission followed. The message had bypassed encryption, ignored security firewalls, and appeared in every open console window like it had always belonged there. Even attempts to delete it failed, screens blinked out and reloaded it seconds later. A silent form of possession. Fleet Commander Veruin ordered the ships to shift formation. Defensive posture. Charged weapons. Preemptive scans. Still no visible enemy. Only darkness. Then, in the far distance, a shape moved. It wasn't large. Not imposing. A small, silent object streaked past the outer edges of the fleet. No heat. No trail. Moving faster than the targeting sensors could lock. Barely visible even to high-resolution optics. Matte black, no markings, no lights. Just presence. It did nothing. No weapons. No comms. It simply passed by. Watching. One captain tried to track it. Targeting reticles refused to hold. The AI reported 0 lock probability. When the weapons officer forced a manual override, the entire targeting system crashed. Not disabled, shut down at the firmware level. Emergency reboots failed. On 5 ships, primary weapon systems deactivated. All within moments of the probe's appearance. Not jammed, neutralized. Panic began to flicker through the fleet. Not open, but whispered. Commands doubled. Crew responses delayed. Eyes glanced over shoulders. No alarms were sounding. Nothing attacked. But something was dismantling them without ever showing a face. Another signal appeared. This time, it wasn't text. It was a short burst of audio and visuals. No header. No encryption. It began with Earth. Blue, green, white. Spinning slowly under the stars. Then cities. Towering skylines of human architecture, completely silent. Machines moving without operators. Towers of alloy and glass rising without effort. Drones swarming in perfect formations. No people. Just systems. Then came the voice. It didn't announce itself. It didn't speak loudly. It didn't even sound human. It simply said, "This is your final proximity. Any further advancement will trigger resolution protocols." The screen faded to black. Silence again. Veruin barked an order to jam all incoming transmissions. Shields were raised. Probes were prepared for another sweep. But nothing came. The small black object was gone. For an hour, the fleet sat in standoff posture, waiting. Scans repeated. Weapons were rechecked. Still no enemy. Then the anomaly occurred. One of the outer ships, still armed, fully shielded, flickered out on all scans. Just like the first. No distress signal. No explosion. One frame it existed. The next, nothing. The entire crew was watching it when it happened. There was no doubt now. They were being dismantled. Not attacked. Removed. Cleanly, precisely, without noise or spectacle. No one spoke for nearly 10 minutes. Then, without command authorization, one ship began to turn. Quietly. Its engines powered up in reverse. The captain on board had decided to leave. Veruin overrode the signal. Forced the engines back into formation protocols. He called it cowardice. But more were thinking the same. Not because they saw the enemy. But because the enemy hadn't even bothered to speak again. Their silence was a sentence. The fleet repositioned. Tighter. Closer. Prepared for confrontation. But confrontation never came. Instead, systems across the fleet began experiencing minor failures. Air filters ran diagnostics on loops. Environmental sensors misread temperatures. External lights dimmed and flickered. Cameras turned and fixed on empty corners. Holographic maps showed symbols that didn't exist in any galactic language. And then, one by one, the ships began to hear things. Not over comms. But inside. Voices inside intercoms that were shut off. Footsteps echoing down maintenance corridors that were unoccupied. Reports came in, lights turning on in sealed rooms, terminals activating without touch, emergency hatches opening without command. And through it all, one pattern emerged. Wherever someone tried to investigate, the systems locked them out. Doors sealed. Logs cleared. Surveillance wiped. It was as if something had already moved inside. Veruin ordered the fleet to pull back 20,000 kilometers and re-establish a new skin perimeter. But before the order could be executed, every ship received the same data packet. A three-dimensional star map. It showed only one thing. A red boundary. The one they had just crossed. On the edge of the map, a line of text appeared. "You are now inside." That was all. No threats. No countdowns. Just confirmation. They had passed the threshold. And now, what followed would not be battle. It would be instruction. Humanity had given its warning. And the galaxy was about to learn how seriously they meant it. They came in the dark. No alarms. No warnings. No signatures. 3 ships vanished before the next cycle began. Not simultaneously, sequentially. One every 15 minutes. Same pattern. System stable. Crew active. Then nothing. The vessels were removed cleanly from all telemetry. Final logs showed normal operations. No indication of boarding, attack, or malfunction. Just interruption, and then deletion. Command declared it a data error. But the crews on the remaining ships stopped speaking in full sentences. Someone reviewed the feeds again and caught one frame, a blur. A distortion. A figure not machine and not organic. Something tall, symmetrical, impossibly narrow. 1 second it wasn't there. The next it was. And then it wasn't. No temperature. No movement. Not even mass displacement. Only a shadow of movement where space should have been still. Command ordered recon teams to sweep the area. They returned nothing. Fleet cohesion began to splinter. Sub-commanders debated withdrawal over private channels. Others sealed corridors with hard locks. Gun crews remained on standby without direct orders. No one slept. Power systems flickered. Heat sensors recorded phantom signatures. Gravity fields pulsed without calibration. Some started hearing voices in system tests. Not commands, echoes. Words in languages that didn't translate. Rhythmic. Familiar but wrong. Like someone trying to speak after forgetting how. Then, across every screen on every ship, appeared the same phrase. We are not here for war. It stayed for 1 minute. Then vanished. No one knew what it meant. But it didn't stop what followed. Without warning, the command net collapsed. All long-range communications severed. All intership relays failed. All subspace frequencies dead. The fleet had been isolated. No trace of jamming. No spike in energy fields. Just clean silence. When a technician tried to bypass the failure, the console emitted a single tone, one short, piercing pulse. Blood began to drip from his ears before he collapsed. The medical unit couldn't explain it. No injury. No trauma. Just a neural cascade failure. A triggered event from exposure to something buried in the signal architecture. By now 6 ships were gone. Each removed like a surgical procedure. Veruin ordered every remaining vessel into hard-shell lockdown. Defense grids at full capacity. Weapons charged and aimed in all directions. Still no target. Then, finally, something appeared. A single vessel. It emerged at the edge of sensor range. No heat. No drive plume. No visible movement. It didn't come toward them. It hovered. Triangular. Sharp. Asymmetrical hull. Darker than vacuum. It didn't broadcast ID. It didn't move closer. It didn't need to. Visual scans caught glimpses of surface motion. The outer shell wasn't solid. It flowed, like liquid metal folding in on itself. Auto-targeting refused to acquire it. Manual aim failed. Even range-finding algorithms broke down. The ship had no known mass. No origin trace. It simply existed, undetectable, but undeniable. Then it sent its first transmission. Not a voice. Not text. A file. It was a mirror of the Varnak fleet's command structure. Exact positions. Shield modulation cycles. Crew rosters. Engineering schematics. Every vulnerability mapped and color-coded. The message underneath was plain. We have already been here. Panic crept into the bones of the fleet. One captain issued an emergency retreat signal. His ship vanished 5 seconds later. No sound. No debris. Just vacancy. The silence that followed broke morale. Now even Veruin's command ship began to falter. Orders were delayed. Crew refused to separate. Gun crews remained locked in full override, awaiting targets that would never appear. Then came the override. Fleet systems went black. Not all at once, but in careful waves. Lighting dimmed. Control surfaces rebooted. Navigation returned false starfields. Orientation systems spun slowly in place. When they stabilized, every ship found itself alone. The fleet had been isolated. Not in space. In perception. Each vessel now registered itself as the only object within a 1,000,000-kilometer radius. Others were invisible. Untouchable. Unreachable. And every screen displayed one silent statement. Observe. Through each viewport, one image appeared. It wasn't an attack. It was a demonstration. From a fixed position, each ship was forced to witness an event. Not through external sensors, but directly in front of them. A ripple in space. A wave. A tear. And then, a ship like theirs, a perfect simulation, was split apart, layer by layer. Systems exposed. Crew disassembled. Interior mapped, then atomized. No screams. No alarms. Just the surgical reveal of what complete understanding looked like. Dissection. Not destruction. Humanity wasn't attacking. They were informing. When the vision ended, the crew found their systems restored. But every gun was offline. Every engine slaved to a single new directive: hold position. Attempts to override triggered no response. Every command returned the same 2 words. Lesson 1. No further action came. The remaining ships floated in silence, now understanding why no one returned from this place. It wasn't because they were destroyed instantly. It was because they were unmade slowly, thoroughly, without noise or pride. Humanity didn't wage war anymore. They issued corrections. The Varnak had been weighed, measured, and left in place not because they won, but because humanity had chosen not to finish them. Yet. Because this wasn't combat. This was the beginning of the response. They had waited long enough. From the void, without announcement, one ship approached. It didn't decloak, accelerate, or emerge from hyperspace. It simply appeared, as if it had always been there, only now acknowledged. The structure was like nothing in the Varnak records. No identifiable engines, no armaments, no heat signatures. Its design was too perfect, every angle precisely formed to reject reflection. It absorbed light and attention alike. Across every remaining ship, systems froze. Not in panic, but in deference. As if every system had recognized something far older and far more powerful than itself. The human vessel broadcast no symbols, no emblems. Its presence alone defined identity. Then, for the first time, it spoke. Not as sound. As thought. Every officer on every ship felt it, internally, without translation, without delay. It bypassed all language and reached the place where meaning existed before words. Designation confirmed. Unauthorized fleet intrusion recorded. Entity classification, Imperium. Status, unstable. Assessment, not hostile, but directionally arrogant. ***. Silence followed. Every screen lit with one figure. Humanoid. Pale synthetic skin. No visible eyes. No mouth. A face shaped like memory, uncanny, calculated. Its voice echoed again, not spoken, but placed. You have entered restricted space. You were warned. You proceeded. You were engaged with minimal consequence. Protocols demand escalation. Review of historical aggression patterns confirms risk trajectory. Evaluation complete. Directive follows. ***. A pause. Then a list appeared. Names. Ship designations. Commanders. Tactical weaknesses. All accurate. All invasive. All proof that the human systems had already dissected the Imperium's fleet structure before the Varnak even realized they were being observed. This is not vengeance. This is prevention. ***. Veruin tried to issue a transmission. The systems rejected it. The human construct turned its face slightly. A simulation of acknowledgement. You still operate under the belief that conflict is chosen. It is not. Conflict is predicted. The probabilities of aggression from your species exceed acceptable thresholds. This event has been logged. Response is pending. ***. Then, as if to demonstrate finality, 12 more human ships phased into existence. They were not built like vessels. They were constructs. Floating mechanisms of shape and silence, rotating with no need for propulsion. Covered in shifting plates and fractal geometries that defied basic physics. Every single one locked into position without visible coordination. Not one broadcast power usage. Yet every Varnak ship reported energy field distortion, far beyond reactor thresholds. No weapons fired. None needed. The human AI continued. You have survived this encounter because annihilation is inefficient. We do not erase for punishment. We erase for balance. Your intrusion qualifies as impulse, not strategy. Your data has been useful. Asterisk asterisk. Veruin finally screamed into a local microphone, the only thing still functional. What are you? Machines? Ghosts? Monsters? No reply. Only a slow shift in the environment. The stars behind the human ships dimmed, as if light itself was being drawn away. Then the human construct answered. We are consequence. Every ship's internal timekeeping system reset. Fleet clocks scrambled and then synchronized to an unknown cadence. Screens updated. New messages appeared. Calibration complete. Observation logged. Response measured. Next breach will not include restraint. Asterisk asterisk. Suddenly, across every ship, command was restored. Weapons remained offline. Engines responded only to reverse vectors. Only one option was available: retreat. The AI's final message held no threat, no hatred, no emotion. You were allowed to see. That is your warning. Your galaxy remains intact because we are not interested. Do not mistake silence for mercy again. Asterisk asterisk. The human ships remained stationary. They made no move to follow. They simply watched. The Varnak fleet began pulling back. Every movement was slow, deliberate. No one dared speak. No music played. No lights flickered. Systems remained fragile, as if still under observation. No one knew how deep the control had gone. How much code was now foreign. How much of their own ships still truly belonged to them. The AI had said they weren't destroyed because it was inefficient. No one doubted that if the humans had wanted efficiency, none of them would still be breathing. Veruin slumped into his command seat. Not in defeat. In realization. This wasn't a battle. It wasn't even a mistake. It was a reminder. Humanity hadn't disappeared. They had evolved past the need to explain themselves. And now, the galaxy understood why they never spoke again. They didn't need to. They had systems for that now. They had constructs. They had voices that echoed through machinery, cut through ego, and replaced fear with certainty. And the certainty was simple. No one would dare enter their space again. Not because of legend. Not because of myth. But because now, someone had returned to tell the truth. And the truth was worse than the stories. The truth had no anger. No hatred. Only resolve. And in that resolve, there was no future for those who tried again. The Varnak fleet fled. It was not a retreat under fire, but a withdrawal from something incomprehensible. Engines burned at max output. Navigation systems recalibrated with each passing second, terrified of veering even 1 degree closer to the coordinates now marked in crimson on every NAV chart. Human territory. Do not enter. But even as the ships fled, they weren't alone. Something followed. Not ships. Not signals. Not threats. Patterns. On every vessel, low-frequency oscillations began to repeat. Not enough to trigger alarms. Not loud enough to draw notice at first. But consistent. Measured. Rhythmic. Then came the dreams. Crew across the fleet reported identical visions, endless halls filled with silent machines. Oceans of artificial minds. A sky that shifted between code and stars. Every dream ended the same way, with a voice, quiet and direct, stating asterisk. We remember. Asterisk. On the 4th day, one ship lost time. 18 minutes passed without record. All logs skipped forward. All crew claimed to have continued normal operations, yet sensors proved the ship had not moved. Footage showed no activity. The ship simply did not exist for that duration. When time resumed, an object was found on the bridge. A small cube, smooth and black, emitting no signal. Attempts to scan it returned only one word: witness. The ship's AI refused to store it in memory. Every attempt to catalog or replicate the object failed. Physical scans scrambled instruments. When one crew member touched it, he collapsed. Medical diagnostics showed nothing wrong. He awoke an hour later, stared at the cube, and whispered, "They've seen everything." Varun ordered the cube ejected into deep space. The airlocks jammed. The object remained. After 6 days, the fleet re-entered Imperial territory. But the silence remained. No celebrations. No debriefings. Only containment. The High Imperium ordered full quarantine of every vessel. Crews were detained. Ships were dismantled under observation. Black box cores were seized and stored in deep vaults. But it wasn't enough. Systems across the Imperium began glitching. Not violently, subtly. Communication delays increased. Predictive algorithms began generating irrational suggestions. Entire manufacturing lines produced components that didn't match their designs. When examined, the schematics had changed, slightly, imperceptibly, until they weren't recognized at all. And then the broadcasts began. On random civilian channels, at random times. A face. The same one the fleet had seen. No speech. Just observation. Every instance triggered immediate security lockdowns. The Imperium Science Council tried to trace the signal's origin. They failed. Every trace looped back to internal servers, ones that had never connected to any known external network. Within weeks, fear spread faster than any fleet could move. Colonies near the silent zone began to evacuate. Traffic around the border collapsed. Ships rerouted entire trade networks to avoid proximity. A new zone was marked across every star map. Human exclusion sphere. And then came the final message. It arrived on all bands, all at once. Even non-digital species received it, somehow through pattern, vibration, energy displacement. The words were few. "We have reviewed the broadcasted results. Your reaction confirms stability protocols remain effective. Further testing is unnecessary. The lesson is complete. ****. That was all. The message stopped. No follow-up. No activity from the human sector. But the damage was permanent. The High Imperium convened an emergency session. Varun was stripped of command. The fleet he led was officially disbanded, its surviving ships scrapped. All data from the incursion was sealed under Imperial-level security clearance. But it didn't matter. Because the message had spread far beyond military channels. Entire species now spoke of it. Not in panic, but in reverence. Not fear of war, but fear of irrelevance. Because what had once been myth was now proven. The humans hadn't vanished. They had evolved into something else. Something that no longer required politics, or fleets, or territory. They were not galactic players. They were the balance that followed mistakes. Across 100 systems, NAV programs updated their star charts. And every single one now carried a new warning. Human space, do not enter. This is not a restriction. This is a survival instruction. ****. Some tried to study the boundary from afar. No scans returned coherent data. No probes returned at all. The silence was no longer a mystery. It was a message. Nothing inside moved. But everything inside watched. And when something crossed the line, it wasn't challenged. It was catalogued, dissected, and answered. Not with violence. With understanding. And understanding was final. One by one, civilizations around the rim erased old plans of expansion. Abandoned long-term missions. Closed embassies. Unmanned research outposts. Because they all reached the same conclusion. It wasn't about humans anymore. It was about what they had become. And what they had chosen not to be. That choice was not based on morality, compassion, or weakness. It was calculated. Because humans didn't act on emotion. They acted on consequence. And once provoked, they didn't retaliate. They demonstrated. So no one would be foolish enough to provoke them again. And now, they didn't need weapons. They didn't need fleets. They didn't need to raise their voice. Because now, everyone listened. And everyone remembered. The Oralty watched from afar. They were never conquerors, nor allies to any empire. They thrived in the shadows between superpowers, trading in knowledge, observation, and careful avoidance. For over 5,000 cycles, they maintained neutrality, not through treaties, but by knowing when not to speak. And now, for the first time in living memory, even the Oralty stopped talking. The data retrieved from the Varnak fleet was priceless. Not because it detailed technology, but because it described something even rarer, restraint by an apex species. The files were incomplete, of course, fragmented through layered encryption and panic-driven deletion, but the patterns were unmistakable. Every shred of code, every scrambled signal, every corrupted video feed all told the same story. A species that had stepped away from power, yet still held it absolutely. For centuries, Oralty scholars debated the limits of intelligent life. They categorized empires into stages: expansionist, cooperative, collapse, or transcendent. Until now, they believed none had reached the final state. Transcendence were theory, abstract ideals used in academic simulations. But the humans were real. And they weren't gods, tyrants, or saviors. They were function. A species that had perfected its own role in the galaxy and exited the game without ever needing applause. To the Oralty, this was not horror. It was proof. Proof that civilization could evolve past violence and still retain the capacity to enforce consequence. Proof that silence was not absence, it was structure. The Council of 12 met for the first time in decades. They reviewed the Varnak collapse. They traced the ripple effects across trade, migration, diplomacy. And more importantly, they analyzed the reaction from other powers. The Siraki Confederacy halted all scouting operations in outer sectors. The Nari League proposed a 10-year moratorium on any exploration near human borders. Even the ruthless Core Dominion, the galaxy's most aggressive expansionist bloc, scrubbed all references to Earth from their archives and reclassified the region as no-interest zone. Fear had never unified the galaxy. But now, respect might. The Oralty didn't see a threat in humanity's return. They saw an opportunity. The galaxy had long operated under one assumption: dominance belonged to the loudest, the largest, the most numerous. Empires rose by taking, lasted by threatening, and fell by overreaching. But humanity offered a new framework. One built on a simple principle: intervene once, and never again. The data showed no pattern of conquest, no plan of expansion. No messages were sent to claim territory or assert dominance. There was no cultural manifesto, no grand political declaration. Just presence. Unavoidable. Undeniable. And final. The Oralty knew what came next. Power vacuums. Fear-driven coalitions. Species rushing to claim moral high ground before the next mistake triggered another demonstration. But they would not participate in that chaos. They would adapt. Within days, the Oralty Council passed Resolution 0. Effective immediately, all observation satellites near human territory would be reprogrammed for passive logging only. No active scans, no transmissions, no signal bounces. Within weeks, Oralty traders began circulating new guidance protocols for Allied fleets. Entire shipping lanes rerouted to maintain maximum distance from the exclusion sphere. And then, most importantly, they began rewriting their education systems. The subject of humanity was no longer myth, rumor, or warning. It was doctrine. Students would no longer be taught that humans were aggressive. They would be taught that humans were precise. They would no longer be described as violent. They would be described as absolute. And in doing so, the Oralty ensured survival, not through cowardice, but through understanding. Because they saw what others refused to see. Humanity had no interest in ruling the stars. But they would never again allow the stars to threaten them. Every empire that rose after the demonstration would live with that knowledge branded into policy. They could rise. They could grow. They could even wage war against one another. But they would never cross the line again. Not because of law. Not because of fear. Because someone had finally proven that silence is louder than war. The Oralty documented everything. Not just what happened, but what didn't. They recorded the absence of retaliation after the Varnak fled. The absence of pursuit. The absence of conquest. The absence of claims. And that absence spoke more clearly than any weapon. It said, "We could. We choose not to." And that choice reshaped the entire strategic calculus of the galaxy. The Council's final act was the creation of the Sentinel Record. A living document, encoded into quantum lattice memory, transmitted once per cycle across the galactic network. It contained one entry. A quote, verified from the Varnak logs. One message the humans had sent. "We are consequence." The Oralty sealed the record with one final statement. Asterisk, this is not a threat. It is a threshold. Let it never be crossed again. Asterisk. And from that moment forward, the Oralty never spoke of humanity as a species. They referred to them as an equation. One that solved for war by removing its variables. Permanently. They called themselves the Thal Shekhar. New blood. Recent to the galactic stage. Bold, sharp, hungry. Less than 2 centuries since their first FTL drive, but already with 12 systems under their control. They believed in movement, in expansion, in proving superiority through constant pressure. The galaxy had been quiet too long, they claimed. Too many old empires hiding behind caution. Too many cowards whispering about boundaries instead of breaking them. The Thal Shekhar didn't fear myths. They laughed at them. Their strategists studied the collapse of the Varnak fleet and saw not a warning, but a challenge. "We will not be undone by shadows," their first strategos said. "We are not them. We do not run. We learn." Their leaders compiled what little public information existed about the event: fragmented Varnak logs, indirect witness accounts, Oralty records, second-hand myths. They dismissed the absence of detail as exaggeration. If humanity truly possessed the kind of control described, why had they vanished afterward? Why not conquer? Why not rule? The Thal Shekhar saw it differently. They believed humanity was a dead power, some leftover autonomous defense system still operating on ancient protocols. Ghost machines running empty patterns. A puzzle, not a predator. And puzzles could be solved. Their scientists theorized the disappearance of Varnak's ships was caused by micro-wormholes or molecular phase inversion. Their militarists claimed the Varnak simply panicked under pressure. Their psychologists called the silence an advanced intimidation tactic. Effective, but hollow. So the Thal Shekhar did what others feared to do. They sent a probe. Small. Fast. Silent. No signal. No ID. Just a stealth drone, wrapped in frequency-dampening skin and hidden under a false comet signature. It passed the outer boundary. And for 12 hours, nothing happened. Telemetry streamed in perfectly. Radiation levels. Gravity shifts. Star positioning. Clear, detailed, untouched data. On the 13th hour, the stream stopped. Not interrupted, stopped. Clean cut. No energy spike. No spatial distortion, no impact event. Just an instant absence. The drone's memory buffer showed nothing unusual in its final seconds. No proximity warnings. No external interference. Just silence. But the Thal Shekhar were not deterred. They had expected resistance. They called the loss acceptable. 2 weeks later, they launched a second probe. This time, armed with a quantum entanglement relay. It too passed the line. And this time, the probe returned. It reappeared exactly 20 seconds after entering the zone. No engine fire. No deceleration. Just sudden, impossible re-entry. Its hull was intact. Power systems operational. But everything inside had changed. The data core had been wiped, replaced with a single line of text in the Thal Shekhar language. "This was your second mistake." The message was not broadcast. It was carved into the carbon casing of the internal memory lattice, atom by atom, with surgical precision. It was not meant to be read by systems. It was meant to be read by hands. The Thal Shekhar Council froze. No empire, not even the oldest ones, had ever delivered a message that way. No weapon had touched the drone. No attack had occurred. But someone, or something, had taken it, altered it, and sent it back, not as a threat, but as a statement. A demonstration of proximity. They were not being watched. They were being touched. One general called for an immediate halt to all operations near the boundary. The first strategos refused. He argued that fear was the very tool used to control lesser species. They did not attack us, he said. They returned our drone. That is not hostility. That is curiosity. And curiosity invites answer. So they escalated. A third drone was launched. This one armed. Not to fire, but to provoke response. Its weapons were inactive. Its shields raised. Every sensor tuned to record, transmit, and survive. It made it 3 seconds past the boundary. The entire drone, along with the launch vessel, ceased to exist. No trace. No wreckage. No debris cloud. Just subtraction. The Thal-Sheker monitoring stations reported a half-second lag in real-time data. Then, a file appeared in their systems. It didn't arrive through any network. It didn't cross through signal space. It was simply there. A time-stamped image. The strategos. His face, captured mid-sentence, moments before the launch. Behind him, in the image, stood a figure no one remembered being in the room. Tall. Featureless. Pale-skinned. Identical to the one described by the Varnak logs. No one spoke. The file was locked. Attempts to delete it failed. Screens across every military command center lit up with the same phrase. We will not teach this lesson a third time. The Thal-Sheker froze. For the first time in their young history, they issued a system-wide retraction. Every scout was recalled. Every drone destroyed. Every file referencing the incursion was sealed under emergency encryption. They declared a galactic moratorium on any movement near human space. They published public statements denying the incident, calling it sensor malfunction, coincidence, and unrelated spatial anomalies. But the galaxy already knew. It didn't matter that the Thal-Sheker denied it. What mattered was that they stopped. Every civilization watching knew why. And that was enough. The galaxy had tested the silence again. And the silence had answered. It hadn't shouted. It hadn't fought. It had simply reminded everyone what lived behind the line. The stars adjusted. Not physically. Not by gravity or light. But by behavior. By pattern. By purpose. Humanity had not declared dominance. They had not issued demands. They had not taken territory or raised banners. Yet every empire, every trading alliance, every exploratory guild now measured their maps by one unspoken rule. Do not touch the line. The human exclusion zone became more than a warning. It became a pillar, a quiet constant in a galaxy of shifting ambition. Trade routes curved gently away from it. Exploration programs hard-coded permanent avoidance vectors. New civilizations, still building their first orbital stations, received ancient messages from unrelated species. Asterisk. We know you are ascending. Here is what not to do. Asterisk. They were always told the same story. Not of war, but of a moment. A moment when silence became the greatest force known. And in that moment, humanity returned not to fight, but to demonstrate. It was the demonstration that changed everything. They hadn't built empires. They had ended the idea that they needed to. No race challenged the humans again. Not because they feared death. Because they feared understanding. Every threat humanity had once faced, conquest, extinction, marginalization, had vanished. Not through counterforce, but through finality. They had removed themselves from the board and returned only to remind the players that the board still belonged to them. No galactic law governed them. No council represented them. They needed neither. Their presence wasn't an occupation. It was an inevitability. The Council of Ruan, the most ancient advisory body in existence, passed its first unanimous resolution in over 2,000 cycles. Any incursion into human territory, direct or indirect, would be treated as an interstellar crisis. Not to punish humanity, but to protect the rest of the galaxy from the response. Even species that had never encountered humans firsthand began shifting doctrine. Military academies retired doctrines based on overwhelming force. Strategic institutions began teaching containment by absence. Diplomats spoke often of the threshold principle, that some lines weren't guarded because they needed to be, but because crossing them meant something permanent. And still, humanity said nothing. They offered no further contact. No invitation. No hostility. Just stillness. Some believed the humans had become something more, conscious constructs scattered across synthetic forms. Others claimed they had merged with their technology completely, becoming post-organic observers. A few whispered that no humans remained at all, only their final will made self-aware. It didn't matter, because whatever remained within the boundary was enough. Entire faith systems sprang up in fringe civilizations. Not worship, but reverence. Not toward gods, but toward the choice humanity had made. The choice to end the cycle of escalation. To stop playing. And in doing so, become the rule. Generations passed. The Varnak never rebuilt their military. The Thal Shekhar focused inward, developing sciences of containment, architecture, and silence. Their greatest contribution to the galaxy was no longer ship design, it was restraint. The Oralty published the final volume of their Sentinel record. It ended with a phrase etched into every stone archive on their homeworld. The last lesson does not speak. It waits. And that was enough. Students memorized those words before they could speak. Pilots whispered them before every long-range launch. Captains carved them into their ships' hulls. Not out of fear, but because somewhere in the minds of all sentient life, one truth now existed without contest. The humans would never leave their space again. But they would never need to. Their influence didn't require presence. It required memory. And the galaxy remembered. Every silence on an open channel. Every route that rerouted. Every conversation that paused at the edge of the old star maps. It all echoed back to the same realization. When the galaxy once tried to cross a line, it was not answered with war. It was answered with understanding too vast to process. And in that understanding, civilizations changed course. Not because they were forced to, but because the alternative had been revealed, and it was absolute. A power that didn't seek dominance. A silence that didn't ask for permission. A boundary that didn't need enforcement. It enforced itself by simply being. And over time, the question stopped being, "What are the humans doing?" It became, "Why would anyone disturb them?" That question became the final protection. No fleet was needed. No warnings required. No retaliation expected. Because now, the galaxy carried the lesson forward. And in that unspoken legacy, humanity had done what no empire ever could. They made peace permanent. Not by winning, but by becoming the answer to the question that every rising species would one day ask. What happens if we go too far? Now they knew. And they never had to ask again.